In the square, a poor girl sleeps inside a cardboard box. When the young billionaire approaches, she says, "I sleep here every night, but please, don't let him feel cold." Upon seeing what's beside her, he is shocked. Nathan adjusted his tie for the 5th time that evening. The hotel ballroom glimmered with golden lights and crystal glasses. Polite smiles, firm handshakes, and generous checks circulated in a predictable ballet. At 31, Nathan knew exactly how to behave at these events, whom to greet, when to smile. His company had donated a considerable amount to the cause. Whatever it was, he couldn't even remember. "Excellent initiative, Mr. Fisher," said an older woman with grey hair and a pearl necklace. "Thank you," he replied automatically. Another handshake, another smile. He checked his watch. 10:30. Enough time for a discreet exit. Nathan walked over to the host, expressed his thanks, and stepped out into the cold October night. The hotel's luxury was left behind as he loosened his tie and unbuttoned the top of his shirt. He took a deep breath. The icy air cut into his lungs like a knife. Why did it all feel so empty? It made sense, of course. Helping the needy, sharing the wealth, feeling useful. But he felt nothing besides the satisfaction of a completed obligation. Another item crossed off the agenda. Nathan shoved his hands in his coat pockets and veered off his usual path. He wasn't ready to head back to his apartment just yet. Westfield Square came into view, lit by yellowish lamp posts. The benches were empty, trees swayed in the wind, and a thin mist covered the ground. The place was deserted as he expected at that hour and in that cold. A movement caught his attention. Something stirred near a trash can. Nathan narrowed his eyes, alert. A large cardboard box, the kind used to transport appliances, wobbled slightly. Probably a stray cat, he thought. But curiosity carried him a few steps closer. The box moved again, this time more forcefully. Then, to his astonishment, a small hand appeared on the edge, followed by a head with dark, disheveled hair. A little girl. Nathan froze. The child looked at him with fearful yet resolute eyes. She couldn't have been more than 4. "Don't let him feel cold, please," she said in a voice as small as she was. "What?" Nathan stepped closer, confused. "Who's cold? Are you here alone?" The girl pointed into the box. Nathan crouched and pulled aside the folded cardboard that served as a cover. His heart stopped for a second. A baby, a very small baby, wrapped in thin cloth, visibly trembling. His lips had a bluish tint that made Nathan take off his coat immediately. "My God," he whispered, wrapping the baby in his coat. "Who left you here?" The girl didn't answer. She just watched Nathan's movements intently, as if gauging whether he was trustworthy. Nathan pulled out his phone with his free hand and dialed 911. While explaining the situation to the dispatcher, he kept the baby close to his chest, trying to warm him up. "What's your name?" he asked the girl once he'd hung up. "Maisie," she replied, still not moving from her spot beside the box. "And him?" "Rowan. He's my brother." Nathan nodded, as if that explained everything. "The ambulance is on the way. Maisie, we'll take Rowan somewhere warm, okay?" She nodded, finally stepping fully out of the box. She wore a dress far too thin for that night, and her shoes were wet. Nathan wondered if he should hug her as well, but she kept her distance. The ambulance lights appeared at the corner of the square a few minutes later. Paramedics ran to them. Nathan explained how he'd found the children. A woman in uniform tried to take the baby, but met with resistance. "It's okay," said Nathan, surprising himself. "I'll carry him to the ambulance." Inside, Maisie sat close to Nathan, who was still holding Rowan. One paramedic checked the baby's vitals while the other drove quickly to the hospital. "Are you the father?" asked the paramedic. "No," Nathan answered. "I found them in the square, alone." The man nodded gravely. "This baby needs warmth and urgent care. Looks like he's only a few days old." Nathan glanced at Maisie, who was staring fixedly at her brother. He tried to imagine what was going through her head. How had these children ended up in a cardboard box, in an empty square, on a cold night like that? "Will he be okay?" Maisie asked, her voice barely audible. "We'll do our best, little one," replied the paramedic. Nathan felt a lump in his throat. A 4-year-old shouldn't have to worry about her brother's survival. She should be home, safe, listening to bedtime stories. Suddenly, Maisie began to sing. It wasn't exactly a song, no clear melody or sensible lyrics. It was more like a rhythmic whisper, with made-up words and soft tones. She leaned closer to her brother in Nathan's arms and continued her improvised lullaby. The baby, who had been restless until then, relaxed a little. His eyes remained closed, his irregular breathing unchanged, but his tiny body seemed less tense. "He likes it when I sing," Maisie explained as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Mommy used to sing like this." At the hospital, Nathan should have left. His role ended there. He had found the children, called for help, taken them to the hospital. Mission accomplished, but something stopped him from leaving. Maybe it was the way Maisie held his hand when they entered the ER, or the silent plea in her eyes, begging not to be left alone again. He stayed. He sat in the waiting room while the doctors examined Rowan. Maisie stayed by his side, now wrapped in a blanket the nurse had given her. She didn't speak much, but her eyes said it all. Fear, worry, and a weight far too big for someone so small. "Are you hungry?" Nathan asked. She nodded. He bought sandwiches and juice from the hospital cafeteria. Maisie ate in silence, watching the door through which her brother had been taken. "You saved us," she said suddenly, between bites. Nathan swallowed hard. He didn't feel like a hero. He was just a man who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Or was it the wrong place at the wrong time? He couldn't decide. "Anyone would have done the same," he replied. Maisie shook her head. "No, a lot of people passed by and didn't see us." Those simple words hit Nathan like a punch. How many people had walked through that square before him? How many had heard a cry, noticed a moving box, and just kept going, wrapped up in their own lives? A nurse appeared at the waiting room door. "Mr. Fisher? The doctor would like to speak with you." Nathan hesitated, glancing at Maisie. He didn't want to leave her alone. "She can stay with me," offered the nurse, noticing his concern. "We'll find her some dry clothes." Maisie squeezed Nathan's hand. "You'll come back." "I promise," he replied, surprised by the sincerity in his own voice. The doctor was waiting in a small office, a middle-aged man with deep circles under his eyes and a tired but kind expression. "Mr. Fisher, I'm Dr. Harris. I wanted to thank you for what you did tonight." Nathan shook his head, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "How's the baby?" "We managed to stabilize him. Hypothermia, malnutrition, dehydration, but he's strong. He'll pull through. And then, what happens to him? And to his sister?" The doctor sighed, taking off his glasses and massaging the bridge of his nose. "It's a complicated situation. The girl told us a few things. Their mother died after giving birth, about a week ago. It seems it was a home birth without medical assistance. The father, well, it appears he just vanished. He abandoned them. So it seems. Maisie said her father left to get food a day after Rowan was born and never came back. They stayed alone in the apartment for 2 days until the landlord showed up demanding overdue rent. She got scared and ran off with her brother." Nathan felt a surge of anger. How could anyone abandon 2 children like that? "We've notified social services," the doctor continued. "They'll be placed in temporary foster care as soon as the baby is discharged." Foster care. The word weighed heavily in Nathan's stomach. He imagined Maisie and Rowan in a cold, impersonal place, separated from each other, waiting for a family that might never come. "How long will the baby stay in the hospital?" "At least a week, maybe longer, depending on how he responds to treatment." Nathan nodded, absorbing the information. A week, 7 days, 168 hours, an eternity for a 4-year-old who had just lost her mother and been abandoned by her father. "May I see him?" The doctor led him to the neonatal ICU. Rowan lay in an incubator, connected to tubes and monitors. He looked even smaller and more fragile under the hospital's white lights. "Would you like to bring Maisie to see him?" "If that's possible, yes." Minutes later, Maisie entered the room wearing hospital clothes, a child's pajama set that looked huge on her tiny frame. Her hair was combed, and her feet were now in clean, dry socks. She ran straight to the incubator as soon as she saw her brother. "Rowan!" A nurse lifted her so she could see better. Maisie placed her hand on the incubator's glass, as if trying to touch him through it. "Is he sleeping?" she asked. "Yes," the nurse replied. "He's resting to get strong." Maisie nodded, serious. Then, to everyone's surprise, she started singing again. That same melodyless tune, that same rhythmic whisper she had used in the ambulance. Nathan felt something stir in his chest. A pang that wasn't unpleasant but was definitely intense. He watched the little girl singing to her brother through the glass, protecting him in the only way she knew how. The nurse exchanged a look with the doctor. Something unspoken passed between them. "Has she been doing this since they arrived?" Dr. Harris asked. Nathan nodded. "On the way here, too, she said their mother sang like that." The doctor nodded thoughtfully. "It's amazing, the bond they share. She feels responsible for him, even being so young." Maisie kept singing, oblivious to the adults' conversation. Her world at that moment was just Rowan and that lullaby. "What's going to happen to them now?" asked Nathan, though he already knew the answer. "The social worker will come in the morning. They'll try to find a relative, but until then, I can take them." The words left his mouth before he could think. Nathan was as surprised as the doctor and the nurse. "I mean, until they find a relative or a permanent home," he quickly added. "I have space in my apartment. I can look after Maisie while Rowan stays in the hospital." Dr. Harris studied him for a moment. "You'll have to discuss this with social services. There are procedures to follow." "I understand, but at least for tonight, can she stay with me? Here at the hospital? I don't want her to be alone." The doctor hesitated, then agreed. "I'll arrange for an extra bed in the observation room. You can stay there tonight." Maisie finished her lullaby and turned to Nathan, as if only now noticing him again. "Is he going to be okay?" "He will," Nathan replied, surprised by the certainty in his own voice. "You two are going to be just fine. I promise." She studied him for a moment with eyes far too wise for her small face. Then, to his utter shock, she stretched out her arms toward him, asking to be picked up. Nathan scooped her up, feeling how light she was. Maisie rested her head on his shoulder, exhausted. In seconds, she was asleep. The weight of that child in his arms felt both strange and familiar, as if an empty space inside him, one he hadn't even known was there, had suddenly been filled. "I think I just made a promise I'm not sure I can keep," he whispered to the doctor. Dr. Harris smiled gently. "The best promises usually are." That night, lying on the makeshift bed in the hospital room, with Maisie sleeping in the bed next to him, Nathan stared at the ceiling and thought about how his life had changed completely in a matter of hours. From an empty charity event to 2 abandoned children. From a solitary man to, what exactly? A temporary guardian. The soft sound of Maisie's breathing filled the silence of the room. It didn't seem fair that she had lost so much in so little time. It didn't seem fair that Rowan's life had started in a cardboard box. Maybe life wasn't about fairness, Nathan thought. Maybe it was about unexpected encounters in deserted squares, about empty hearts that suddenly find something to beat for. He closed his eyes, imagining what tomorrow would bring. The social worker, the questions, the paperwork. He had no idea how to convince them to let Maisie stay with him, even temporarily. He had no experience with children, no training, but he knew one thing for sure. He wouldn't leave those children alone again, not if he could help it. With that thought, Nathan finally fell asleep, while outside the city continued its life, indifferent to the small miracle that had taken place on that cold October night. 3 days passed with Nathan splitting his time between the hospital and work. Each night, he slept in the uncomfortable chair beside Rowan's incubator, while Maisie curled up on a makeshift couch. The nurses knew them by name now, and one of them always brought hot chocolate for Maisie on those cold mornings. On that Wednesday, Nathan arrived earlier than usual. He found Dr. Harris examining Rowan, who looked rosier and more active than in previous days. "Good news," the doctor said, smiling for the first time since they'd met. "This little guy's a fighter. He's responding better to treatment than we expected." Nathan felt immediate relief. "So he's out of danger. The critical phase has passed. Now it's all about gaining weight and strength." Maisie, who was drawing in a notebook donated by a nurse, lifted her head. "Can we take him home?" The doctor and Nathan exchanged looks. Home. The word hung in the air like a question without an answer. What home? The apartment they had shared with their mother was gone. A foster shelter was just that. Temporary. Dr. Harris cleared his throat. Technically, he could be discharged tomorrow, but, Nathan pressed, the social worker still hasn't found a temporary home available to take them. Shelters are overloaded this time of year. With the cold setting in, the children's department is swamped with cases. Nathan felt adrenaline course through his body. This was his chance, the opportunity he'd been waiting for since he inexplicably decided he wouldn't abandon these children. "They can stay with me." The doctor looked at him, surprised. "I thought your offer was just for that one night." "So did I," Nathan admitted, "but 3 days have passed and no one has come for them. I can't just leave them in a hospital corridor or an overcrowded shelter. Mr. Fisher, taking care of 2 children, especially a newborn, isn't simple. Do you have any experience with this?" Nathan swallowed hard. "No, but I can learn. I'll hire professional help, and it's only temporary until social services find a more permanent situation." Maisie was watching the conversation, her eyes moving between the 2 men, trying to decipher what was at stake. "You're going to let us live at your house?" she asked, with a hopeful voice that squeezed Nathan's heart. "If it's allowed, yes." Her smile lit up the room. "Will Rowan like your house?" "I hope so," he replied, unsure what else to say. His 2-bedroom apartment downtown wasn't exactly child-friendly. It was functional, minimalistic, not much personality, like his life up to that moment. Dr. Harris sighed. "I'll call Ms. Reynolds from Social Services. In the end, she's the one who decides." 2 hours later, Nathan was sitting before a middle-aged woman with grey hair pinned in a severe bun. Her thick-framed glasses slid down her nose as she examined his documents. "Mr. Fisher, I understand your concern, but there are procedures we must follow. We can't just release 2 vulnerable children to anyone who shows up." "I'm not just anyone," Nathan replied, trying to keep calm. "I'm the one who found them. I've spent the last 3 days with them. Maisie trusts me." Ms. Reynolds studied him over her glasses. "And what is your interest in this case? Why do you care so much?" The question caught him off guard. Why did he care so much? What did these children mean to him? A 31-year-old single man, career-focused, with no family plans. I can't explain," he finally admitted. "But when I found them in that square, something changed. I can't just go back to my life and pretend they don't exist." The social worker was silent for a moment, considering his words. Then, to Nathan's surprise, a slight smile appeared on her lips. "You know, Mr. Fisher, in this job we learn to be suspicious of people's motives. We see so many hard cases, so many sad stories. Sometimes when someone like you shows up, our first reaction is to suspect." She closed the folder. "But we also learn to recognize sincerity when we see it. And you do seem sincere. So, here's what we'll do. As a temporary measure, to prevent the children from ending up in an overcrowded shelter, I'll authorize them to stay under your provisional care, but with conditions." Nathan nodded, anxious. "What conditions?" "Regular visits from social services, a full interview regarding your background and financial status, an inspection of your apartment to ensure it's child-appropriate, and you'll need to take a short course on infant care." "I accept all the conditions." "One more thing," she added. "You'll have to hire professional help to care for the baby, at least for the first few weeks. A pediatric nurse or an experienced nanny. I was already planning on that." "Ms. Reynolds pushed her glasses back into place. "Very well then, I'll prepare the paperwork. If all goes well, the children can go home with you tomorrow." Nathan could hardly believe what he was hearing. He left the social worker's office feeling both elated and terrified. What was he doing? How would he turn his bachelor apartment into a home for 2 kids overnight? As he walked through the hospital corridor, his mind was already making lists. He would need a crib, diapers, clothes, bottles, suitable food for Maisie. And where would he put it all? His second bedroom was basically an office with just a desk and a couch. When he returned to the neonatal ICU to share the news with Maisie, she seemed to guess the answer from the look on his face. "We're going to live in your house?" she asked, her eyes shining. "For now, yes." She clapped her hands, excited. "Will I get my own room?" "Of course. I'll have everything ready by tomorrow." "Where's Rowan going to sleep?" Nathan hadn't thought that far. "In his own room, I guess," Maisie frowned. "But he's too little to be alone. What if he cries at night and no one hears?" Maybe he can stay in your room for now." She nodded, satisfied. "I'll take care of him. I know how to sing the song he likes." Nathan smiled, marveling at how mature this 4-year-old was. She had assumed the role of her brother's protector so naturally that he sometimes forgot how small and vulnerable she actually was. The next 24 hours were a race against time. Nathan left the hospital only to transform his apartment into a minimally child-friendly space. He emptied the office, moving the desk to a corner of the living room. He bought a child's bed, colorful sheets, a crib that the salesman assured was the safest on the market, enough diapers for a month, bottles, formula, an extra heater, and dozens of other items he hadn't known existed. In a children's clothing store, he stopped in front of an overwhelming selection. "First time?" asked a middle-aged saleswoman found with an understanding smile. "That obvious, huh?" "All first-time parents have that panicked look," she laughed. "I can help." Nathan explained the situation as simply as he could. He was taking in 2 children, a 4-year-old girl and a newborn baby. The saleswoman, touched by the story, guided him through the store, picking out essentials. 4-year-old girls usually like to pick their own clothes," she explained. "Buy the basics now and then bring her to choose a few pieces. As for the baby, he'll grow fast in the first few months, and so don't overbuy." On his last stop, Nathan visited a nanny agency recommended by the hospital. The receptionist listened attentively to his needs. "We have several professionals experienced with newborns," she said. "But for your situation, I recommend Linda. She has 20 years of experience and has worked with several families in unusual situations." 2 hours later, Nathan sat in his newly rearranged apartment, talking to a robust woman in her mid-50s with red hair and kind eyes. "So you've never cared for children before?" Linda asked bluntly. "Never. And you have no idea what you're doing?" Nathan laughed nervously. "Is it that obvious? You bought size 2 diapers for a newborn, and the child's bed you put together is upside down," she smiled. "But don't worry. I've seen worse." Linda inspected the apartment with a critical eye. "We need some safety adaptations, outlet covers, cabinet locks, a safety gate for the stairs. But the basics are here." "Do you think they'll be okay?" Nathan asked, revealing his insecurity. Linda studied him for a moment. "Children don't need perfection, Mr. Fisher. They need stability, affection, and patience. The rest we figure out along the way." That night, Nathan could hardly sleep. By 6 in the morning, he was up, checking every detail of the apartment one last time. By 9, he was at the hospital, signing the final discharge documents for Rowan. "Remember, he still needs special care," Dr. Harris explained as he handed over prescriptions and instructions. "Weekly checkups, daily weight measurements, close attention to his body temperature. The nurse you hired will know what to do, but stay alert." Nathan nodded, absorbing each word as if his life depended on it. In a way, it did. Rowan's did, at least. Maisie was beaming in her new dress and the backpack Nathan had bought for her. Inside, she only had her drawing pad and the pencil the nurse had given her, but she carried it as if it contained treasures. "Ready to go?" she asked, eager. "Almost. Rowan needs to get dressed first." A nurse brought the baby out, now clad in a light blue onesie and wrapped in a thicker blanket than the flimsy cloth Nathan had found him in. He looked so tiny and fragile that Nathan felt afraid to hold him. "You have to support his head," the nurse instructed, placing Rowan in his arms. "Like this, see? He can't hold it up yet." Nathan adjusted his arms, feeling the baby's slight weight. Rowan opened his eyes for a moment, those same deep blue eyes that had struck him on the first day, and then went back to sleep. "He likes you," said Maisie, watching. "How do you know?" "Because he's not crying." He cries with almost everyone else. Nathan smiled, grateful for the vote of confidence. With Rowan secure in one arm and Maisie's hand in the other, he stepped out of the hospital into the sunny autumn day. The ride home was quiet. Maisie peered out the taxi window, taking in the city that would now be her home. Rowan slept peacefully in the car seat that Nathan had installed with the driver's help. When they arrived at the building, the doorman greeted them with curiosity. "A new family, Mr. Fisher." "Something like that, Paul," Nathan replied, unsure how else to explain. "They'll be staying with me for a while." In the apartment, Linda was already there, having used the key Nathan gave her the previous day. The place felt cozier than he remembered. Curtains open, homemade soup bubbling on the stove, the children's room arranged more functionally. "Welcome home," she said with a smile. Maisie walked in timidly, looking around the new space with curious eyes. She stopped in front of the bed with star and moon-patterned sheets. "Is this my bed?" "It is," Nathan answered. "Do you like it?" She nodded, running over to touch the sheets. Then she noticed the crib beside the bed. "And this is Rowan's bed, right next to mine. I figured you'd want to be near him." The smile Maisie gave was worth every penny and every minute Nathan had invested in the past few days. The first few hours were an intensive lesson for Nathan. Linda showed him how to change diapers, prepare bottles at the right temperature, burp Rowan and check his comfort. Maisie watched everything attentively, occasionally offering her own pointers. "He likes it when you rock him this way," she said, demonstrating with her hands, "not too fast." That evening, after dinner, Linda said goodbye. "I'll be back at 7 tomorrow. Call if you need anything, anytime." Nathan thanked her, trying to hide the panic he felt. He'd be alone with the children for the first time. Following the instructions, he helped Maisie take a bath, brush her teeth, and change into new pajamas. Rowan got his last bottle of the day and was laid in the crib, clean and fed. "Bedtime," Nathan announced, attempting to sound confident. Maisie climbed into bed but didn't lie down. "How are you going to tell a story?" Nathan froze. He hadn't bought any children's books. "What kind of story would you like?" "Mommy always told the one about the princess who saved the dragon." "The princess saved the dragon? Isn't it usually the other way around?" Maisie shook her head. "No. The dragon was sad because everyone was scared of him. The princess was the only one who saw he was good." Nathan smiled. "Sounds like a great story. How does it begin?" "Once upon a time." He sat on the edge of the bed and improvised a tale about a brave princess who befriended a lonely dragon. Maisie corrected details occasionally. "No, the dragon was blue, not green," or "he only breathed fire when he was upset." When the story ended, she finally lay down. "Now I have to sing so Rowan can sleep." Nathan nodded, watching as she leaned over the crib and started that same tuneless lullaby. That same rhythmic whisper he was now used to. Rowan, who had been squirming, immediately calmed down. Later, after Maisie fell asleep, Nathan returned quietly to the room. He watched the two children sleeping, still unable to believe they were there, in his apartment, under his care. Rowan stirred in the crib, making a soft sound. Nathan approached, worried he'd wake up. The baby opened his eyes for a moment, looked at Nathan, then drifted back to sleep, content. That simple act, the instinctive trust of a baby, touched something deep within Nathan. He realized, with a clarity he hadn't had before, that he wasn't just helping these children. In some way, they were saving him too. He went back to the living room and sat on the couch, exhausted but unable to sleep. His phone showed 3 missed calls from Claire, his sister. She probably already knew, through mutual friends, about his new family situation. The difficult conversation could wait until tomorrow. Right now, all that mattered was the 2 children sleeping in the next room, trusting he'd be there when they woke. And he would be. 2 weeks had passed since Nathan brought Maisie and Rowan home. The social worker's visits were now every other week instead of weekly, a sign that things were going well. Rowan was gaining weight and color, finally looking like a healthy baby. Maisie still had occasional nightmares, but generally woke up smiling, eager to start the day. Yet one question lingered in Nathan's mind. Where was the children's father? How could a man simply abandon his kids like that? More importantly, was there a chance he might return one day to claim them? That last thought prompted Nathan to hire a private investigator, recommended by his lawyer. "So you want to find the kid's father," said Ray Martin, a man in his mid-50s with subtle scars on his face and eyes that seemed to have seen it all. "For what? To hand them back over?" Nathan felt a chill. "No, I need to know if he's a threat. If he'll show up one day wanting his kids back." Martin nodded, understanding. "What do you already know about him?" "Almost nothing. Maisie said his name is Daniel. The mother's name was Ellie, Eleanor Carter. She died soon after Rowan was born, at home, with no medical help. That's all I've got." "Last apartment address?" 47 Hawkins Street, apartment 3C. "So I've already been there. The landlord said they were 3 months behind on rent. He didn't know anything about the father, only that he worked odd jobs, never anything stable." Martin scribbled the info into a battered notepad. "It's a start. We'll need Maisie's birth certificate if it exists. Any documents from the couple. Photos if the girl has any. Maisie brought nothing but the clothes on her back. Everything else was left at the apartment, and when I went there, the landlord had already cleared it out." "The landlord's name?" "Morton. George Morton." Martin kept jotting notes. "I'll begin today. First step is talking to this Morton again. Then I'll check hospital records. Maisie had to be born somewhere. With luck, the father's full name is listed." As he left, Nathan hesitated. "Mr. Martin, if you find him, don't contact him directly. Just let me know first, please." The investigator gave him a curious look. "You really care about these kids, and don't you?" "More than I ever thought possible." 3 days later, Nathan got the first call from Martin. Apparently, the landlord had kept some of the tenants' personal belongings in a box, hoping they'd return. "Mostly documents," Martin explained, "including Maisie's birth certificate." The father's full name was Daniel Thomas Reed, born in Camden, New Jersey, 34 years ago. No current address, no record of steady employment for the past 2 years. Maisie's birth certificate showed that Eleanor Carter had been only 22 when Maisie was born and wasn't married to Daniel. "I'm following a few leads," Martin said. "He seems to have a pattern of temp jobs and frequent address changes. I'll check homeless shelters and social assistance centers. People like him often resort to those places." Nathan spent the next week personally visiting every shelter in the city. He showed a faded photo Martin had found among the belongings, a thin man with dark hair and a wary look. No one recognized him, or at least no one admitted to. At one shelter, he met a social worker named Diane, who showed particular interest in the case. "The stories I hear here every day would break your heart," she said as they walked through the shelter's courtyard. "People who lost everything, jobs, homes, families. Most don't start out wanting to abandon responsibilities. Life pushes them, one small mistake at a time." "Are you defending what he did?" Nathan asked, unable to hide his indignation. Diane shook her head. "There's no excuse for abandoning 2 children. I'm just saying there's always a story. And from what you've described, it sounds like Daniel was in free fall for a while." "How so?" "Temp jobs, overdue rent, a pregnant partner, a small child to support, no family to lean on. It's a recipe for disaster, especially if there's alcohol or drug abuse involved. Maisie never mentioned any of that. Kids are surprisingly good at normalizing tough situations," Diane noted. "To her, whatever was happening was just normal." That conversation stayed in Nathan's mind for days. At night, he watched Maisie playing with her new toys or telling made-up stories to Rowan. What had she witnessed in her 4 short years? What kind of normal had she known before Nathan came into her life? Martin called at the end of the week. "I've got some info, but no recent leads on his whereabouts." They met at a cafe near Nathan's office. Martin looked tired. "I spoke to former co-workers, neighbors, people at the bars he used to frequent. The story's always the same. Daniel Reed was unstable, a heavy drinker. He worked just enough to scrape by, but things got worse in the weeks leading up to Rowan's birth. One witness said they saw him arguing violently with Eleanor 2 days before the birth." Nathan felt a knot in his chest. Was Maisie there? Probably. The apartment only had 1 room besides the bathroom. And after Eleanor died, Martin glanced at his notes. From what I gathered, Daniel went into shock. A neighbor heard the baby crying and knocked on the door, found Eleanor dead in bed, Daniel drunk on the floor, and Maisie trying to look after the newborn. The neighbor called an ambulance, but it was too late for Eleanor, postpartum hemorrhage, apparently. Nathan closed his eyes, picturing the scene. Maisie, at 4, having to deal with her brother's birth, her mother's death, her father's collapse. The next day, Martin continued, Daniel left saying he was going to find food. He never returned. That same neighbor fed Maisie and Rowan for 2 days until the landlord showed up. Maisie must have gotten scared and fled with the baby. What about relatives? Didn't Eleanor or Daniel have family? Eleanor was an orphan, raised in the system. As for Daniel, I have an address for his mother in New Jersey, but she died 3 years ago. No known siblings. Nathan absorbed the information in silence. The situation was worse than he had imagined. What do you think? He finally asked. Will he come back? Martin sighed. In my experience, people who abandon responsibilities like that rarely return, especially when guilt is involved. He probably associates those kids with the worst moment of his life. So, my professional opinion, Daniel Reed doesn't want to be found, and even if he did, his situation would be too unstable for any court to grant him custody. Those words brought Nathan a guilty sense of relief. On one hand, he was glad the children wouldn't be ripped away from him. On the other, how would he explain to Maisie that her father had deliberately abandoned them? She asks about him, Nathan admitted. Not often, but she does. What should I say? Martin put away his notes. The truth, as much as she can handle. Kids know when we lie to protect them. Driving home, Nathan traveled slowly, thinking about everything he'd learned. The abandonment hadn't been a desperate, impulsive act. It was the culmination of a spiral of neglect that likely started long before. When he arrived home, he found Linda serving dinner, while Maisie told an elaborate story about an adventure her teddy bear had that afternoon. And then he said, "Thank you for saving me, Maisie. You're the bravest person in the world," she concluded, her eyes shining. Nathan smiled, trying to hide his sadness. That girl had lived through so much in such a short time. She deserved stability, safety, love, everything her biological father hadn't provided. Later, after Linda left and the children were asleep, Nathan sat in the dark living room. Martin's report lay on the table beside the documents from the old apartment. A faded photo of Daniel Reed stared back at him, empty eyes, a defeated expression. Nathan picked up the photo and placed it in a drawer. Someday, Maisie might ask more insistently about her father. When that day came, he would need the right words to explain the abandonment without completely destroying her image of her original family. For now, though, his focus had to be elsewhere, building a new sense of security for Maisie and Rowan, a new understanding of what it meant to have someone to rely on. Someone who, unlike Daniel Reed, wouldn't disappear at the first sign of trouble. A month had gone by since the children entered Nathan's life. The social worker's visits were now every other week, not weekly, an indication that things were running smoothly. Rowan was putting on weight, finally looking like a healthy baby. Maisie still had occasional nightmares, but usually woke up with a smile, eager for the day. It was one Sunday morning that Nathan realized something had changed, not just in the children, but in him. In the kitchen, Maisie was already sitting at the table, swinging her legs that didn't reach the floor. Instead of asking for what she wanted, she simply waited, as if certain of what would happen next. "Good morning," said Nathan, yawning. "Good morning," she replied brightly. "It's already 8:20. Nathan looked at the clock, confused. "And it's orange juice time," Maisie announced as if it were obvious. "Sunday mornings are for orange juice. Then we have pancakes." He smiled, surprised by her observation. He hadn't realized that his improvisations over the past few weeks had become an expectation, a pattern. On Sundays, he usually squeezed fresh oranges, something he'd never done before the kids arrived. And yes, he tried to make pancakes, though the results varied. "You're right," he said, taking oranges out of the fridge. "Want to help?" Maisie nodded, dragging the step stool he'd bought so she could reach the counter. Together, They cut the oranges and squeezed them in a manual juicer. She insisted on doing her part, though her small arms could barely apply enough pressure. "Is Rowan still asleep?" Nathan asked. "Yes. He always sleeps until 9:15 on Sundays." She spoke with the seriousness of a tiny expert. "On other days, he wakes up earlier." Again, Nathan was amazed. Maisie hadn't just noticed the emerging routine, she'd memorized it, categorized it, turned it into something predictable, something safe. "You like routines, don't you?" he commented while pouring juice into cups, a small plastic one for her, a larger one for him. Maisie thought for a moment, her brow furrowed. "Routines mean you know what's going to happen." "Yes, exactly." "Then I do like them," she confirmed, sipping her juice. "Before, I never knew what was going to happen." The simplicity of that statement hit Nathan hard. Of course she valued predictability. Her life before had been defined by the lack of it, never knowing if there'd be food, if her father would be sober, if they'd have to move again. In that moment, he made a silent promise. He would keep the routine she cherished so much. Not just the schedules and activities, but the feeling of safety that came with them. As he made pancake batter, he watched Maisie coloring at the table. She worked with intense focus, her tongue sticking out slightly. That was her habit when she was completely immersed in something. "What are you drawing?" he asked, curious. "It's a secret," she replied, covering the paper with her arm. "Only when it's done." From the next room came Rowan's waking noises, not crying, but the babbling he made when he was content, just announcing his presence. 9:12, Maisie announced, looking at the kitchen clock. "He woke up early today." Nathan smiled. "I'll go get him." "Wait!" Maisie jumped off the chair. "I have to say good morning first." She dashed to the bedroom, and Nathan followed, curious. Standing beside the crib, Maisie rose on her tiptoes to see him better. "Good morning, Rowan. Today is Sunday. Orange juice and pancake day. We already made the juice." "You almost woke up right on time." Rowan smiled at the sight of his sister, waving his arms in recognition. At 2 months old, he was already reacting differently, more positively, to Maisie's voice. "Now Nathan can pick you up," she concluded, as though there was a protocol to follow. Nathan stepped forward, marveling at the interaction between siblings. He picked Rowan up carefully, feeling far more confident than on day one. The baby immediately snuggled against his shoulder, a gesture that always warmed Nathan's heart. Back in the kitchen, he placed Rowan in the baby seat, strategically positioned so he could see both the table and the stove. Maisie returned to her secret drawing while Nathan finished making pancakes. Linda would arrive later, at 2. On Sundays, she only stayed a few hours, giving Nathan time with the kids, but also a break to handle personal tasks, though more and more, his personal tasks involved shopping for the children or meeting with his lawyer about custody matters. Breakfast followed its usual ritual. Maisie insisted on feeding Rowan a spoonful of mashed banana, explaining its benefits to him with comical seriousness. Nathan found himself laughing more than usual, enjoying every moment of this scene that, just a month ago, would have been unthinkable in his solitary life. After breakfast, it was Rowan's bath time, another part of the routine Maisie seemed to have catalogued in her mind. "Sunday is bath with the yellow ducky," she reminded him, pulling the toy from the bathroom shelf. "Tuesday and Thursday is with the blue fish." Nathan nodded as if this information were crucial to the functioning of the universe. In the small universe they were building together, maybe it was. He filled the baby tub with warm water, testing the temperature with his elbow the way Linda had shown him. Maisie handed him everything he needed with the efficiency of a tiny surgical assistant. Mild soap, a soft towel, a clean diaper, a chosen outfit. "Ah, you're a great helper," Nathan praised, gently washing Rowan's back. Maisie beamed with pride. "I've always helped take care of him, ever since he was born." Her words, spoken so casually, reminded Nathan that for Maisie, caring for her brother wasn't just play or novelty. It was a responsibility she had carried since witnessing his birth under tragic circumstances. "You know you don't have to be responsible for everything, right?" Nathan said gently. "I'm here to help now. And Linda too." Maisie looked at him, thoughtful. "But I like helping." And you help a lot. I just want you to know you can also just be a kid. She seemed confused by the concept. What do you mean? Play, draw, make a mess sometimes. Not worry so much. Maisie pondered for a moment. Can I do both? Help with Rowan and also be a kid? Nathan felt a sudden swell of emotion in his throat. Of course you can. After the bath, he dressed Rowan in the onesie Maisie had picked out, yellow with little ducks, matching the bath theme. The coordinating choice made Nathan smile. The rest of the morning followed the Sunday pattern that Nathan was starting to recognize. A walk to the nearby park, where Maisie liked to watch ducks on the pond. Rowan dozing in his stroller, sheltered from the mild autumn sun. At the park, they saw other parents with children. Nathan still felt like an imposter in that group, like everyone might notice he wasn't a real dad, just someone stepping in temporarily. But Maisie showed no such insecurity. To her, they were a family like any other. "Is that your dad?" asked a girl of about 6 who was playing near Maisie in the playground. Nathan, sitting on a nearby bench with Rowan, held his breath, anxious to hear her reply. Maisie didn't hesitate. "That's Nathan. He found us when we were cold, and now we live at his house." The other girl accepted the explanation without further questions, with the typical flexibility of children. "Cool. Want to play tag?" Maisie looked at Nathan, as if asking permission. "Go ahead," he encouraged. "Just stay where I can see you." Watching her run and laugh with her new friend, Nathan felt a mixture of joy at seeing her act like a normal child, sadness for all she had been through, and something else, something he couldn't quite name but which filled a void inside him he hadn't even known was there. Back at the apartment, Linda was waiting. She'd brought Maisie a gift, a set of high-quality crayons, with colors the girl had never seen before. "Lavender, turquoise, magenta," Maisie exclaimed, examining each one reverently. "Thank you, Linda." "You're welcome, sweetheart. I thought you might like some new colors for your drawings." While Linda prepared lunch, Maisie returned to the small table in the living room, enthralled by her new treasures. She resumed her secret drawing from earlier, reinvigorated. Nathan used the time to answer a few work emails. Since the children arrived, he'd reduced his hours at the office, working remotely whenever possible. His co-workers had been surprisingly understanding, especially after meeting Maisie and Rowan during a visit to the office. Sunday lunch had its own ritual too. It was the meal they ate in the living room, watching a movie or cartoon, a rule Maisie had come up with, and Nathan couldn't bear to break. Today's choice was an animated film about animals forming a band. Maisie sat between Nathan and Linda on the couch, carefully balancing her plate. Rowan was in Nathan's lap, dozing off after his bottle. "This is my favorite day," Maisie declared between bites. "Sunday?" Nathan asked. "Yes, everyone is together." The simplicity of her statement touched both Nathan and Linda. It was true. Sunday was the only day everyone was around at the same time, without hurry as without outside obligations. After lunch, while Linda tidied up the kitchen, Maisie brought over the drawing she had finally finished. She found Nathan as he was putting Rowan down for his afternoon nap. "All done," she announced, extending the paper. "I finished it." Nathan looked at the drawing and felt his heart skip a beat. There were 3 figures, clearly identifiable despite the childish style. A small one in a red dress, Maisie, an even smaller one in blue, Rowan, and a taller one in brown pants, Nathan. They were holding hands in front of a yellow house with a red triangular roof, a simplified version of the apartment they lived in. Above the figures, in uneven, colorful letters, were the words, "Our family." "It's beautiful, Maisie," Nathan said, voice thick with emotion. "This is our house," she explained, pointing, "and these are us." "Our family," Nathan read aloud, tracing his finger over the colorful letters. Maisie nodded. "Linda helped me write it, just a little. I did the drawing all by myself." Nathan hugged her, unable to put into words what he felt. Maisie returned the hug with a surprising strength for someone so small. "I'm going to put it on the fridge," he decided, when he could finally speak. Linda, who had been watching from the doorway, smiled. After Maisie left to put away her new crayons, she approached Nathan, who was still gazing at the drawing with misty eyes. "The kids have already decided," Linda said softly. "You belong to them." Nathan looked at her, taken aback by the remark. "Kids are wiser than we think," Linda continued. "They know a home when they see one. And you've given them that. Not just a roof and food, but security and love." "I still feel like an imposter sometimes," Nathan admitted. "Like at any moment someone's going to show up and say I made a mistake, that I'm not qualified for this." Linda chuckled quietly. "No parent ever feels fully qualified, believe me, even those who plan for years. Parenthood is like that. You learn on the job, one day at a time." That evening, after Linda left, the routine continued. Dinner at 6, Maisie's bath at 7, story time at 7:30, Rowan's last bottle at 8. Sitting in the armchair in the children's room, Nathan read a story about a rabbit that got lost in the forest and found its way home by following the stars. Maisie listened attentively from her bed while he rocked Rowan in his other arm. "Do stars help you find your way?" she asked when the story ended. "They used to, a long time ago. Sailors used them as maps." Maisie looked out the window, where a few stars were visible in the darkening sky. "I think the stars helped me find you." Nathan felt a lump in his throat. "How so?" "When we were in the box, I saw a star through the crack. I asked it to send someone nice. Then you showed up." He couldn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Then I owe that star a thank you, someday." "She already knows," Maisie said, with the absolute confidence of a child. After placing Rowan in his crib and making sure Maisie was asleep, Nathan returned to the living room. The apartment was quiet, but not in the oppressive way it used to be. It was a comfortable silence, full of life. On the fridge, held up by colorful magnets, Maisie's drawing seemed to glow in the kitchen light. "Our family," the crooked letters proclaimed, and Nathan realized he could no longer imagine life without those two kids. Lying in bed later, he replayed the day in his mind. The fresh orange juice, Rowan's bath, the walk in the park, the drawing, the bedtime story. A simple routine built around the needs and preferences of two little beings who had entered his life so unexpectedly. Before the kids, his Sundays had been filled with extra work, the occasional gym session, and long hours of streaming, trying not to think about the coming week. Now every moment seemed to have purpose and meaning. For the first time in a long while, perhaps in his entire adult life, Nathan fell asleep smiling, certain that, come morning, there would be someone waiting for him, someone who cared about him, someone who would call for him as soon as they woke, eager to start another day together. The routine Maisie had created wasn't just a sequence of events. It was a silent statement. We're here to stay, we're a family, and you, Nathan, are part of it. Sunday dinner at the Fisher household had always been an inviolable tradition. Nathan had skipped it the past few weeks, always with the same excuse. The children. His mother finally put her foot down, insisting he come. "We need to talk about this temporary arrangement of yours," she said on the phone, making it clear the family had opinions about the matter. Today, for the first time since Maisie and Rowan came into his life, Nathan left them at home with Linda, who kindly offered to stay the whole evening in case dinner ran long. Maisie protested at first. "Why can't we go too?" she asked, her big eyes filled with disappointment. "It's just a boring grown-up dinner," Nathan explained, smoothing her hair. "Besides, you'll meet my family soon. I promise." The truth, which he didn't dare tell Maisie, was that he needed to prepare the ground first. And, knowing his family, he suspected the conversation to come wouldn't be appropriate for a child's ears. Driving to the suburb where he grew up, Nathan rehearsed mentally what he would say. How would he explain the transformation in his life? How would he make his practical, no-nonsense family understand something he himself struggled to explain logically? The two-story house where he had spent his childhood appeared as he turned the corner. The immaculate yard, the welcoming lights in the windows, Claire's car already in the driveway. Everything exactly as expected. Some things never changed. His mother welcomed him with a hug that lasted longer than usual. "We've missed you," she said, scrutinizing him. "You look tired." "Short nights," he answered with a small smile. "Babies aren't known for sleeping through." Margaret Fisher nodded, as though confirming a suspicion. "Come on in. Everyone's already in the living room. His father, Richard, rose from his favorite armchair when Nathan entered. The firm handshake and pat on the back were his way of showing affection. Claire and her husband, David B., were on the couch, wine glasses in hand. "The father of the family finally arrives," Claire teased, her tone a blend of irony and curiosity. Nathan accepted the provocation with a smile. "Good evening to you too." Dinner unfolded with the usual polished efficiency, typical of the Fisher family gatherings. Claire's tales of the robbery she'd witnessed at court, his father's promotion at the bank, his mother's plans to re-landscape the yard. Everything was discussed over roast beef and potatoes. The children were only briefly mentioned. "How are those little ones?" his mother asked, serving dessert. "They're well," Nathan replied. "Rowan's already gained 2 pounds. Maisie starts preschool next week." "Preschool?" Claire raised an eyebrow. "That sounds permanent." There it was, the opening Nathan had been expecting. "Actually," he began, setting his fork down, "that's what I wanted to talk to you all about." The silence that followed was almost tangible. His father lowered the newspaper he kept partly open, even at the table. His mother stopped mid-motion of pouring coffee. Claire exchanged a quick glance with David. "I'm thinking of seeking permanent custody." He dropped the bomb. Nathan watched their faces shift. Surprise, confusion, concern. "Permanent custody?" his mother repeated, as though she hadn't heard correctly. "Yes. I've spoken with social services and an adoption attorney. Since no relatives have come forward and considering the circumstances, I have a good chance." "Nathan," his father began, using the carefully neutral tone he reserved for delicate issues, "don't you think you're being hasty? They've been with me almost 2 months now. We've adapted well." "Maisie's happy. Rowan's healthy." 2 months is nothing," Claire interjected, dropping any pretense of neutrality. "You're talking about taking responsibility for 2 children for at least the next 20 years. "I'm aware of that." "Are you?" his sister insisted. "Nathan, you've always been career-focused. Your apartment is practically an office with a bed. Since when do you want to be a father? And a single father at that?" Nathan took a deep breath. He'd anticipated resistance, especially from Claire, the family's voice of reason and planning. "It's not about wanting to be a father. I already am, in a way. Maybe not biologically, but in all the ways that matter." "You feel responsible because you found them," his father observed. "That's understandable, but it's not guilt or responsibility," Nathan cut in. "I love them. It's that simple." The word love hung in the air, almost visible. The Fishers were not a family prone to grand emotional displays or dramatic declarations. Efficiency, planning, and good sense had always been more valued than impulses of the heart. "Love is important," his mother said softly. "But raising children requires more than that. Stability, preparation." "I'm financially stable," Nathan replied. "As for preparation, well, who's ever really prepared? Even parents who plan for years." Claire shook her head. "You're romanticizing parenthood. It's not just taking them to the park on weekends and telling bedtime stories. It's sleepless nights, constant worries, hard decisions, and you'll be doing it alone." "I'm not alone. I have Linda, the nanny. I have friends who support me, and I was hoping I'd have my family too." The last sentence carried a silent question. An uncomfortable silence settled. David, always the diplomat, tried to smooth things over. "I think we're all just concerned about your well-being, Nathan. And the kids as well. The question no one's asking," Claire added, leaning forward, "is what happens when you realize reality doesn't match this fantasy you've built? What happens to the kids when you get tired of playing the hero?" Nathan stared at his sister, feeling a surge of irritation. "Is that what you think of me? That I'm playing house? I'm thinking of the kids," Claire retorted. "They've already been abandoned once. They don't deserve to go through that again if you realize your life has been turned upside down." "Claire," their mother warned, but Nathan raised a hand. "No, Mom, let her speak." "Speak. I want to hear every argument because I'm sure social services and the judge will ask the same questions." Claire sighed, her tone softening a bit. "Nathan, you never once mentioned wanting kids before. You're not even in a stable relationship." Suddenly you decide you want to be a dad to two traumatized children. Life rarely follows our plans, he replied. Sometimes the best things are the ones we never planned for. This isn't the Nathan we know, Claire insisted. You always weighed all options, thought through every angle before making a decision. Maybe the Nathan you knew needed to change, he answered, surprising even himself with the firmness in his voice. You're making decisions with your heart, not your head, Claire concluded, delivering the verdict Nathan had expected. What if I am? He challenged. What if, for the first time in my life, I'm prioritizing what I feel over what seems logically correct? His father cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Son, no one's saying you can't keep helping these kids. We just think there might be families more prepared to adopt them. Traditional families, you mean? Nathan's tone had an edge. A mom and a dad, a house with a yard, a dog, the whole package. Wouldn't that be better for them? His mother asked, genuine concern in her voice. Nathan sighed. Maisie had nightmares the first few nights. She woke up crying, calling for her mother. Now, when she has a nightmare, she calls for me. Rowan smiles when he hears my voice. They trust me. That's lovely, Nathan, but, Claire began. There's no but, he interrupted. There's already a bond. Taking them away from me now would traumatize all of us. A heavy silence fell over the dining room. Margaret began clearing plates, a mechanical way to process the information. Richard opened his newspaper again, hiding behind its pages. I think we all need time to absorb this, David said, trying to mediate. It's a big decision. Nathan shook his head. I've thought about it a lot. I'm not asking for permission or approval. I came out of respect to share a decision I've already made. Claire eyed him with a mix of frustration and genuine concern. You're not listening, are you? This will change your life completely, forever. It already has, he replied simply. Helping his mother take the dishes to the kitchen, Nathan sensed she wanted to say something. Finally, when they were alone, Margaret turned to her son. These children, she began hesitantly. Do they really mean that much to you? Nathan didn't have to think. More than I can explain. His mother nodded slowly. Then I suppose you've made your decision, regardless of what we say. Will I have your support? He asked, realizing how much it mattered to him. Margaret didn't answer immediately. She busied herself putting leftovers in containers, sealing them with the methodical precision Nathan knew from childhood. Your father and I have always wanted your happiness, she said at last. If you believe this will make you happy, then yes, you have our support. Thank you, Mum. As for Claire, give her time. She worries about you, in her own way. Nathan smiled. I know. Later, driving back home, he reflected on the evening. The reactions had been exactly what he'd expected. Claire saw risks everywhere. His parents were worried but ready to accept. David tried to keep the peace. None of it shook him. On the contrary, hearing the objections out loud only strengthened his resolve. Every logical argument Claire presented had already gone through his mind dozens of times. And still, the answer remained the same. He couldn't imagine his life without Maisie and Rowan anymore. Arriving home, he found Linda asleep on the living room couch, a children's book open on her chest. In the children's bedroom, Maisie slept cuddling Mr. Buttons, her inseparable teddy, while Rowan breathed softly in the crib nearby. Nathan stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching. Claire was right about one thing: he had changed. The old Nathan, calculating, practical, always in control, would have analyzed this situation logically and concluded it was unwise. He would have taken the most rational course, handing the children over to the system, but that Nathan no longer existed. In his place stood a man who finally understood that some decisions can't and shouldn't be made solely with the head. Family wasn't just about blood, it was about choice, and he had made his. Nathan woke with a jolt, feeling something was wrong. He remained still in the darkness, trying to identify what had disturbed his sleep. A faint sound reached him, almost imperceptible. It wasn't Rowan's cry, which he'd grown used to. It was different, more anguished Maisie. He jumped up, crossing the hall to the children's room. The soft nightlight, shaped like a star, cast gentle shadows on the walls. Rowan slept peacefully in his crib, but Maisie was sitting up in bed, knees pulled to her chest, face buried in her arms, shoulders shaking in silent sobs. "Maisie," Nathan called softly, approaching. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" She lifted her tear-stained face, eyes wide as though still trapped between dream and reality. Seeing him, her lips quivered. "Mommy," she whispered brokenly. "I want Mommy." Nathan's heart clenched. In nearly 3 months together, Maisie rarely spoke of her mother. Sometimes she'd mention little things. "Mommy liked this song," or "Mommy made square pancakes," but always with surprising acceptance. This raw, open grief was new. He sat on the edge of her bed, unsure what to do. "Did you have a nightmare?" Maisie nodded, tears still streaming. "She was walking away. I ran after her but couldn't catch up." Nathan opened his arms, offering comfort without forcing it. After a moment's hesitation, Maisie threw herself against his chest, sobbing aloud now. "Shh, it's okay," he murmured, rocking her gently. "It was just a dream." "But it's true," she hiccuped. "She really went away." How to respond? Nathan had no idea. What could he say to a 4-year-old about the permanence of death? How to explain that her mother would never return, that this emptiness would always be there? "Your mom loved you very much," he said finally. "She didn't want to leave." "How do you know?" Maisie asked, her voice muffled against his t-shirt. "Because nobody who knew you would ever want to leave you. You're too special." Maisie kept crying, but her sobs began to subside. Nathan rocked her gently, wishing he could do more, say more. Then he remembered what Maisie had done so many times to calm Rowan. Without overthinking, Nathan began to sing. Not the same shapeless tune Maisie used for her brother. He didn't know that lullaby. It was an old nursery rhyme his own mother used to sing to him. He didn't remember all the words, so he improvised, mixing remembered lines with new ones. Maisie went quiet, listening. Her breathing gradually grew calmer. Nathan kept singing, his low, slightly raspy voice filling the quiet room. One of Maisie's hands clung to the collar of his t-shirt, as if afraid he might vanish if she let go. He had no idea how long they stayed like that. Eventually, Maisie's breathing became deeper and more regular. She'd fallen asleep in his arms, face still blotchy from crying, but peaceful now. Gently, Nathan tried to lay her back in bed, but as he started to pull away, she clutched his shirt even harder, murmuring in protest. "Stay," she pleaded, half asleep. "Please." He hesitated only a second. Then he settled on the small bed beside her, balancing on the edge to avoid falling off. Maisie snuggled against him right away, still gripping his t-shirt. In minutes, she was in a deep sleep. Nathan stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the children's rhythmic breathing. Maisie's nightmare brought up questions he'd been avoiding. What if the children were placed with another family? How would they handle yet another loss? How would he handle it? The thought of not having Maisie and Rowan in his life was unbearable. They were no longer just the kids he found in the square. They were his kids. Not by blood, but by every shared moment, every laugh, every tear. Right there on that bed, too small for him, with Maisie clinging to his t-shirt like her life depended on it, Nathan made his final decision. He wouldn't just care for them as long as needed. He would make them his permanent family. He would file for full custody as soon as possible. With that resolution, he finally fell asleep. In the morning, Nathan woke to a gentle nudge on his shoulder. He opened his eyes, momentarily confused about where he was. Linda stood by the bed, wearing an unreadable expression. "Sorry to wake you," she whispered. "I've been here 10 minutes, and no one answered." I got worried. Nathan sat up carefully, not to wake Maisie, who still slept soundly. His neck ached from the awkward position. She had a nightmare, he explained softly. Was crying for her mother. Linda nodded, compassionate. "That's normal. Honestly, it's surprising it didn't happen sooner. Kids often process grief in unexpected ways, at unexpected times." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, trying to gather his thoughts. "Linda, I need to talk to you. I've made an important decision." They left the room quietly. In the kitchen, while Linda prepared coffee, Nathan explained his intention to file for permanent custody of the children. "It's about time," she replied, surprising him. "I was wondering when you'd see the obvious. The obvious? That the three of you are a family." Linda handed him a cup. "The way you look at them and how they respond to you, it's special. I've worked with many families over the years. I know the real thing when I see it." Linda's affirmation bolstered his resolve. That very morning, he called his lawyer and scheduled a meeting for the next afternoon. The process would be long and probably complex, but he was prepared to face any obstacle. When Maisie woke up, she didn't mention the nightmare or her nighttime tears. She acted as though it was perfectly normal to find Nathan asleep in her bed. During breakfast, though, she was quieter than usual, watching him thoughtfully while she drank her juice. "You sing nicely," she finally said. Nathan smiled, a bit embarrassed. "That's not true, but thank you." "Yes, it is. Rowan liked it too." "Oh yeah, how do you know?" "Because he didn't wake up. Usually he wakes up if there's noise." Child logic was flawless. Nathan laughed, feeling inexplicably happy about the compliment. The day went on as usual. Nathan worked from home, Maisie played, Rowan alternated between bottles and naps. But something was different in the air, as though the previous night had created a new understanding among them. At dusk, while Nathan wrapped up some emails, his phone rang. It was Claire. "So," she began without preamble, "Mom told me you're going through with this custody idea." Nathan sighed. "Hello to you too, Claire." "Sorry. Hi. How are you? Now tell me you've reconsidered." "I haven't. Actually, I'm more determined than ever." There was silence on the other end, then in a softer voice, "Can I come over? I think we need to talk face to face." An hour later, Claire was seated in Nathan's living room, taking in the toys scattered on the floor, the recent photos of the children in picture frames, Maisie's drawing still pinned to the fridge. "You really changed this place," she remarked. "The kids changed it," Nathan corrected. "I just cleared the space." Maisie and Rowan were already asleep, allowing them to speak candidly. "Nathan," Claire began, choosing her words carefully, "I understand you've grown attached to these kids, but filing for permanent custody is a huge step. Have you really considered the long-term implications? I've thought of little else for the past 3 months, and you still want to go through with it?" "More than ever," Claire sighed, frustrated. "What happened to my pragmatic brother, the one who made pro and con lists before buying a new fridge?" "He met 2 kids in a square," Nathan replied simply, "and decided some things are more important than lists." "Nathan, please, think clearly. You're 31, so with a promising career, an entire future ahead. Taking on 2 traumatized children will limit your options in every way. Or maybe expand my life in ways I never imagined." Claire shook her head, exasperated. "What about relationships? Have you thought how hard dating will be as a single father of 2? "Honestly, no. That's not a priority right now. And in 2 years, 5, 10, when reality sets in and the initial excitement fades?" Nathan studied his sister for a moment. Claire had always been the family planner, always thinking 5 steps ahead. He admired that quality, even when it drove him crazy. "Claire, I understand your concern, truly, but I need you to understand something. This isn't a whim. It's not a phase. It's a conscious decision based on a real bond we've built." "You barely know them," she insisted. "I know enough. I know Maisie can't sleep without Mr. Buttons. I know Rowan smiles brightest in the morning. I know both need stability, safety, and love, things I can give them. Other families could offer that too, more established families with more experience." Nathan drew a long breath, trying to stay calm. "Claire, last night Maisie woke up crying. Had a nightmare about her mom. You know what I did? I sat beside her and sang until she fell asleep. I didn't know the perfect words, didn't know if I was doing it right, but I did my best and it worked." Claire remained silent, watching him. "And this morning, she said she liked my voice, that Rowan liked it too." He smiled at the memory. "Don't you see, I'm not just babysitting, we're building something together day by day. Memories, trust, love." "I still think you're being impulsive," Claire said, though her tone had softened. "And that's not typical of you." Maybe I needed to be more impulsive. Maybe I needed to listen to my heart more and my head less. A soft sound came from the hallway. Nathan and Claire turned to see Maisie standing at the living room entrance, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Mr. Buttons clutched firmly in one hand. "Hi," she said, looking curiously at Claire. "Hi, Maisie," Claire responded, her tone instantly gentler. "Remember me? I'm Nathan's sister." Maisie nodded, still watching her cautiously. Then she turned to Nathan. "I had a dream." "Another nightmare?" he asked and worried. "No." She came over, climbing onto the couch between them. "A good dream. We were all in the park. You, me, Rowan, and Linda. There was ice cream." Nathan smiled, relieved. "Sounds like a great dream." "Can we go to the park tomorrow?" she asked hopefully. "With ice cream." "Of course we can." Maisie looked pleased with that. Then, noticing Claire's serious expression, she asked, "Are you mad?" Claire blinked, surprised by the child's perceptiveness. "No, sweetheart. I'm just talking to Nathan." "About what?" The adults exchanged glances. Nathan hesitated, unsure how much to share. But before he could decide, Claire answered, "About how he wants you both to stay with him forever." Maisie's eyes widened. "Forever, ever?" Nathan shot Claire a warning look, and she shrugged as if to say, "She asked." "Yes," he confirmed. "I'm trying to work things out so we can be an official family." Maisie's face lit up for a moment, only to be replaced by worry just as quickly. "But what if they don't let us?" she asked in a small voice. "Who wouldn't let us?" "The people in charge, the lady with glasses who came here." Nathan kneeled in front of her, taking her small hands in his. "Maisie, I'm doing everything I can to make sure we stay together. There are some people who need to approve it, but I have a good chance." Claire watched the exchange, looking more pensive by the second. Maisie thought for a moment, then released one of Nathan's hands to grab Mr. Buttons, her cherished teddy. She looked at it as though having a silent conversation, then held it out to Nathan. "Take him," she said. "If everything goes wrong, he'll stay with you. He doesn't like being cold." Nathan felt as though he'd been punched in the gut. The simplicity of that gesture, the memory of the night he found them shivering, the significance of her offering her most precious possession, it overwhelmed him. "Oh, Maisie," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Nothing's going to go wrong, I promise. And Mr. Buttons belongs to you." She shook her head, stubborn. "But if it does, will you take care of him?" "Promise? I promise." Nathan pulled her into a hug, unable to say more without his voice completely failing him. Over Maisie's shoulder, he saw Claire discreetly wipe away a tear. Their eyes met, and a silent understanding passed between them. After Nathan tucked Maisie back into bed, he returned to the living room where Claire was waiting. "She gave you her teddy," Claire remarked, not as a question but a statement. "Yes. That teddy is her most important possession, isn't it?" Nathan nodded, his throat still tight. Claire drew a deep breath. "I think I owe you an apology. I didn't fully understand what was happening here." "What do you mean?" "That girl trusts you more than anyone in the world. I could see it in her eyes. And you really do love those kids." "More than I can explain," Nathan admitted. "She mentioned being cold," Claire continued. "Was that how you found them?" "Out in the cold. Inside a cardboard box on a freezing autumn night, Maisie protecting Rowan, asking me not to let him feel cold." Claire closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, there was a new resolve there. "How can I help?" she asked. "With the custody process, I mean." Nathan could hardly believe what he was hearing. "So you've changed your mind?" "Let's say I was convinced by a 4-year-old expert," she replied with a small smile. "Besides, you seem determined, and the Fishers are known for their stubbornness." "Determination," Nathan corrected, returning her smile. "Whatever you want to call it. So, what's the plan?" As they discussed the next legal steps, Claire, being a lawyer, had valuable advice. Nathan couldn't help thinking about Maisie's offer. The teddy bear, protection against the cold. How could a 4-year-old comprehend so much about loss and separation? How could she be so strong and so vulnerable at the same time? At that moment, Nathan realized he truly couldn't imagine his life without Maisie and Rowan. It wasn't about doing the right thing or helping children in need. It was about feeling complete, about belonging. Claire interrupted his thoughts. "What are you thinking about? You seem a million miles away." "I was thinking about what I told Maisie, about us being an official family. And I realized we already are one. The paperwork will just make official what already exists in our hearts." Claire rolled her eyes but smiled. "My brother, the poet. Who would have guessed?" Later, after Claire left, Nathan checked on the children one last time before bed. Rowan, as usual, slept serenely, tiny fists clenched by his face. Maisie had reclaimed Mr. Buttons for her arms. Nathan leaned in, adjusting the blanket over her. "Don't worry," he whispered, knowing she couldn't hear. "No one will be cold anymore. Not ever again." The family court wasn't as imposing as Nathan had imagined. No high ceilings or dark wooden benches. Just a functional room with beige walls, a few artificial plants, and the official emblem behind the judge's desk. Even so, his heart pounded as he waited in the corridor, adjusting the tie Linda had insisted he wear. Next to him, his lawyer reviewed notes with a confident expression. "We have a solid case," he said for the third time that morning. "The social worker's reports are positive. The children are clearly well cared for and happy." Nathan nodded, trying to believe it. The past 6 months had been an emotional and bureaucratic roller coaster. Endless forms, interviews, surprise home visits, psychological evaluations. Every aspect of his life was scrutinized, measured, evaluated. And now, finally, the day of the decision had arrived. "Where are the kids?" the lawyer asked. "With Linda, in the children's room at the end of the hall. I figured they shouldn't watch all this." Wise choice. The judge might want to see them afterward, if things go well. If things go well. Those words echoed in Nathan's mind. What if they didn't? What if after all these months building a life together, the system decided it wasn't enough? The hearing room door opened. A woman in a suit stepped out with a neutral expression. "Mr. Fisher, the judge will see you now." Nathan took a deep breath and entered, followed by his lawyer. On the other side of the room sat Miss Reynolds, the social worker who had overseen the case from the start. She offered a small, encouraging smile. Next to her was a representative from Child Protective Services, whom Nathan had only met once. Judge Morris was around 60, with grey hair and keen eyes behind reading glasses. He didn't look intimidating or particularly friendly, just observant. "Good morning, everyone," he began after the usual formalities. "We're here to decide on the permanent custody petition filed by Mr. Nathan Fisher regarding children Maisie Carter, 4 years old, and Rowan Carter, 8 months. Correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," the lawyer confirmed. "I've read all the reports and evaluations," the judge continued, "but before I rule, I'd like to hear directly from Mr. Fisher." He turned to Nathan. "Mr. Fisher, why do you wish to have permanent custody of these children?" The question sounded simple, but Nathan knew it was anything but. How to summarize what had happened over the past months? How to explain to a stranger the depth of his bond with Maisie and Rowan? "Your Honor," he began, his voice steadier than he expected, "when I found these children that night in October, I wasn't looking to start a family. To be honest, I barely knew what I was looking for in my own life." He paused, organizing his thoughts. "I had a successful career, a comfortable apartment, friends. On the surface, and it seemed I had everything, but inside, there was an emptiness I hardly recognized, let alone knew how to fill." The judge observed him, expression neutral. "That night, I was leaving a charity gala, one of those fancy dinners where people donate money to feel good about themselves. I made my donation, greeted the right people, and left feeling nothing, absolutely nothing." Nathan noticed his hands were trembling slightly. He interlocked his fingers to hide it. "Then I found them. A 4-year-old girl taking care of a baby, hidden in a cardboard box. Maisie looked at me and said, 'Don't let him feel cold, please.' She didn't ask for anything for herself, she just wanted to protect her brother." The judge made a note, his face still unreadable. In the past 6 months, Your Honor, my life has changed completely. Not just in practical terms, work hours, living arrangements, daily routines. It has fundamentally changed who I am. Nathan felt the emotion rising in his throat, but he didn't hold it back. If there was ever a time to be totally honest, it was now. I learned what it's like to be responsible for someone other than myself. I learned how to sing lullabies, even though I'm terribly off-key. I learned I can function on a lot less sleep than I ever thought possible. A small smile tugged at his lips. I learned that pure terror is seeing a 4-year-old with a fever at 3 a.m., and absolute relief is seeing that fever break. The judge nodded almost imperceptibly. But more than anything, I learned what it means to love unconditionally. I never imagined it was possible to love someone the way I love Maisie and Rowan. When they came into my life, that emptiness I mentioned, it just vanished. Nathan paused, mustering courage for the hardest part. I know I'm not the perfect candidate. I'm single, never had kids before, and I'm learning as I go. I make mistakes every day. But I can promise you one thing. I will never, ever give up on them. They'll have stability, safety, education, and most of all, love. Because those children, Your Honor, they're my family now, and I would do anything for them. The room was silent when he finished. His lawyer looked satisfied. Miss Reynolds wore a discreet smile. Even the Child Protective Services representative seemed slightly moved. The judge removed his glasses, cleaning them methodically with a cloth. Mr. Fisher, I appreciate your candor. I sense there's a genuine bond between you and these children. He was about to continue when the door opened, everyone turned to see Claire entering in a hurry, slightly out of breath as if she'd been running. Apologies for the delay, Your Honor, she said formally. I'm Claire Fisher, the petitioner's sister. Nathan felt his stomach drop. In recent weeks, Claire had swung back to her original stance against adoption. Despite that moment of mutual understanding over Mr. Buttons, she eventually voiced new reservations, claiming Nathan was romanticizing parenthood and that reality would be much different than he imagined. Ms. Fisher, said the judge, clearly surprised, I don't see your name on the witness list. I know, Your Honor, but I feel I need to speak. It's important. The judge considered briefly, then nodded. Very well, but keep it brief, please. Claire took a position in the center of the room, avoiding direct eye contact with Nathan. Everyone could feel the tension. Nathan's lawyer leaned over to whisper, but Nathan gestured him to stop. He wanted to hear what his sister had to say, even if he feared her words. Your Honor, Claire began, her professional lawyer voice momentarily in place, I came here today to stop this decision, but not in the way you might think. She took a deep breath, and when she resumed, her voice was softer, more personal. 6 months ago, when my brother told me he found 2 abandoned children and decided to care for them, I thought he'd lost his mind. Nathan has always been the rational one in our family, the planner, the cautious one. This decision seemed completely out of character. Nathan watched her, unable to read her expression. I argued against it. I listed all the reasons it would be hard, all the sacrifices he'd have to make, all the complications that would arise. I said he was being impulsive, emotional, irrational. Claire paused, finally looking straight at Nathan. Tears shone in her eyes, something he rarely saw. I was wrong, she said, voice quivering. Completely wrong. In the past months, I've seen my brother care for these kids with more love than many parents I know. He's changed. And to be honest, I've changed too, just watching it. The words hung heavy with emotion. Nathan felt his own vision blur with tears he tried to hold back. Maisie and Rowan couldn't have a better father, Claire continued. And yes, Your Honor, I said father. Because that's what Nathan is to them now. Not a temporary guardian, not just a caregiver, but a father in every sense that matters. Claire wiped a tear discreetly. As a lawyer, I understand the system is here to protect children, to make sure they have the best home possible. And I can testify without any doubt that the best home for Maisie and Rowan is with my brother. When she finished, the silence in the room was tangible. Nathan wanted to stand up, hug his sister, and thank her, but he stayed put, mindful of courtroom protocol. The judge adjusted his glasses, looking from Claire to Nathan and then at the others present. Finally, he gestured to the social worker. "Miss Reynolds, anything to add?" "Only to reaffirm what I've included in my reports, Your Honor. The children are thriving under Mr. Fisher's care. There is an undeniable bond among them. My official recommendation is to grant permanent custody." The judge nodded, flipping through some documents in front of him. When he looked at Nathan again, there was a warmth in his expression that hadn't been there before. "Mr. Fisher, in my 30 years on the bench, I've learned to recognize sincerity when I see it. And what I see here today is a family. Not a traditional one, perhaps, but definitely a family." Nathan barely dared to breathe. "Based on the testimony heard today, the social services reports, and all the evidence presented, I'm prepared to give my ruling." The judge sat up straighter. "I hereby grant full and permanent custody of Maisie Carter and Rowan Carter to Nathan Fisher, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." The words took a moment to sink in. When Nathan finally understood, an overwhelming wave of emotion almost made him collapse. He had to grip the table to steady himself. "Thank you, Your Honor," he managed to say, voice shaking. "Thank you." The judge smiled. "I'd like to meet your children now, Mr. Fisher. Could you bring them in?" Minutes later, Nathan returned with Maisie holding his hand and Rowan in his arms. The little girl looked around curiously, but showed none of the fear she might have months ago. "Maisie, Rowan," said the judge, noticeably softer in tone. "You've just officially gained a dad. How do you feel about that?" Maisie looked at Nathan, then at the judge. "He was already our dad," she answered simply with a child's frank wisdom. "Now everybody knows it." A gentle laugh passed through the room. The judge nodded, visibly touched. "You are absolutely right, young lady." While the final documents were signed, Claire approached Nathan wordlessly. They hugged, Rowan nestled comfortably between them. Maisie joined in, wrapping her arms around their legs. Leaving the courthouse, Nathan carried Maisie in one arm and Rowan in the other. The April sun shone brightly, as if celebrating with them. His eyes were damp, but his heart had never felt lighter. He was no longer just the man who'd found them on a cold night, who had temporarily taken them in, who had learned to love them. Now, in the eyes of the law and the world, he was what his heart had known for months. He was their father. 6 months after the hearing, life had settled into a rhythm at the Fisher home. The apartment was new, larger, brighter, with a room for each child and a small balcony for stargazing at night. But the real change was in the life that pulsed within it. Where once there was order and silence, there were now scattered toys, laughter, and the occasional baby cry, which, strangely enough, Nathan wouldn't trade for anything. On the main wall of the living room, carefully framed, hung one of Maisie's drawings, 3 figures holding hands in front of a yellow house, with the words "No More Cold Here" written in big, colorful, uneven letters on top. It was the first picture she'd made after moving to the new apartment. Whenever Nathan looked at it, he felt a profound certainty. He had finally found his home. Mornings were a symphony of organized chaos. On this particular morning, Nathan was more nervous than usual. It was Maisie's first day of primary school. She insisted on choosing her own outfit, a blue dress with silver stars and red sneakers. "Is everything in my backpack?" she asked, meticulously checking her school supplies. "My lunch, my pencil case, Mr. Buttons." "Mr. Buttons is going too?" Nathan asked, hiding a smile while feeding Rowan. "He'll stay hidden in my bag," Maisie whispered, "just so I won't be nervous." On the way to school, Maisie chattered excitedly about the friends she planned to make. But when they arrived at the colorful gate, her small hand gripped Nathan's with surprising strength. "What if nobody likes me?" she whispered. Nathan knelt to eye level. "Impossible. You're the coolest person I know." That brought a smile to her face. Shoulders squared like a tiny warrior, Maisie entered the classroom with one final wave. "See you at 3, Dad, Dad." The word still sent a wave of warmth through Nathan's chest every time he heard it. Of all the titles he'd held in life, none meant as much as this one. Back home, he found Linda trying to convince Rowan to eat carrot puree, with little success. "Pa, pa, pa!" babbled the baby when he saw Nathan stretching out his chubby arms. "He just said Papa," Linda exclaimed, as if witnessing a miracle. "Did you hear that?" "Technically, he said Papa Pa, which could mean anything," Nathan replied, though his heart leaped. "Papa!" Rowan insisted, pointing directly at him. Linda gave Nathan a triumphant look. "You were saying?" Life had changed in every aspect. His job, once central to his existence, now occupied a carefully circumscribed slot. Nathan left the office at 5 sharp, ignoring the surprised looks from co-workers who used to see him stay late. Weekends were sacred, reserved solely for his children. He had learned how to make pancakes on Sundays, Maisie's in heart shapes, Rowan's cut into manageable pieces. He'd also learned how to fix broken toys, treat scraped knees, and assemble paper mobiles, skills he never imagined he'd need but now felt as essential as breathing. One Saturday afternoon, after a day at the park, Nathan found Maisie and Rowan sound asleep in the living room, she on the sofa with an open storybook on her lap, he on the rug surrounded by colorful blocks, one tiny hand stretched out as if trying to reach his sister, even while sleeping. Nathan paused at the doorway, taking in the moment without taking a photo. Some moments were too precious to capture. They were meant to be lived. That night, like so many others, Nathan sat on the small balcony of his apartment, inhaling the fresh air and reflecting on all that had changed. Then Maisie appeared, rubbing her eyes in her rocket-patterned pajamas. "Can't sleep?" he asked, making room for her. Maisie shook her head, nestling against him and looking up at the starry sky. "I was thinking about Mommy." Nathan put an arm around her gently. "What were you thinking about her?" She pointed to the sky. "See that star? That's Mommy. I think she's happy." "Why do you think she's happy?" "Because we're together. And no one's cold." The simplicity and depth of her observation nearly took Nathan's breath away. At that moment, a soft cry came from the bedroom. Rowan had woken up. "I'll get him," Nathan said, but Maisie was already on her feet. "I'll go. He likes it when I sing to him." Minutes later, the three of them were on the balcony, looking at the stars. Rowan babbled happily in Nathan's arms, while Maisie pointed again at the bright star, explaining to her brother that it was Mommy. Nathan held his children close, feeling a peace he'd never known. He'd spent so much time chasing success and fulfillment, never suspecting they'd come in the form of 2 children abandoned in a cardboard box. Now he understood. Life didn't have to be perfect, just lived with love. And love, he'd learned, could appear in the most unexpected places, starting with a simple gesture of empathy on a cold night. "Do you want to hear a story?" Maisie asked, turning to Nathan and Rowan. "About the dragon the princess saved." "We'd love to," Nathan replied, smiling at his children under the starry sky. New beginnings can arise in the most unlikely places. Sometimes, a single act of compassion is the first step toward a lifetime of love. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.